the water. So the water is being recycled. That's crucial in the overall cycle of the geothermal system. So we are composed of the heat source, which provides heat in your geothermal reservoir. The reservoir is composed of um, permeable and porous underground rocks, which basically stores the heat, and a cup rock, which is an impermeable rock, which sorts of trap your heat in the reservoir. So without the rock, you can actually don't have that reservoir system. So you might question why there are actually manifestations in a geothermal system. That's because sometimes this geothermal reservoir escapes through some porous membranes. So these are just some manifestations, but the geothermal reservoir itself is actually quite encompassing. Sometimes it's bigger than just those manifestations. So that is the main composition of a geothermal system. If you would look, if we want to compare it to a more, what do you call this, to a more familiar system, you can compare it to boiling a kettle of water. So the cup rack maintains the pressure and the heat in the geothermal system. So you can compare it to the cover of your kettle. And the geothermal fluid, or the water, is basically the water being heated in the reservoir, or that's the water in the kettle that's being boiled. And the permeable reservoir rock is something that can hold or store the water, which is basically the kettle, and the heat source is basically the one supplying the heat to the geothermal reservoir. So, in essence, that's the magma in our geothermal system, but in our kettle concept, it's basically the fuel that you're adding into your kettle. And the steam that you can see for both samples are just manifestations of uh, how a geothermal system is actually working. So let's go on where you can find geothermal energy. Giecel mentioned this a while ago. You can see most of geothermal systems around the uh, Pacific Ring of Fire, so where tectonic movements are actually present. So these are areas wherein most of your geothermal systems would most likely be present. And in fact, if you would look at major producers of geothermal energy, that would include Indonesia, the Philippines, USA, Mexico, and Italy. Most of these are present along tectonic areas that has most likely the formation of volcanoes, and then the possibility to capture those geothermal systems. And if you would look at the history of the geothermal energy, it actually started in 1904 when Prince Piero Ginori Conti installed the first geothermal power plant in Lardellero, Italy. So that's a 250 kilowatt unit that's been operated in 1913 upon its commercial operation. And it actually paved the way in our understanding on how we can harness geothermal energy in in supporting the energy needs of the world. In the Philippines, the geothermal energy development started in 1967. So when the first installed 2.5 kilowatt pilot plant in Barangay Calente, Albay. So that's the first uh, pilot plant in the Philippines. So that's a 2.5 kilowatt pilot plant. And from there, it's been a fast-paced development of geothermal energy in the country. So it's the development of the geothermal power is based from a study by Dr. Arturo Alcaraz, and they have been able to light an electric bulb in Tiwi, which is a town in Albay. So that's as early as 1967. In 1971, the Philippine government invited UNOCAL to transform the 2.5 kilowatt experiment into a commercial operation. And that gives birth to the Philippine Geothermal Incorporated, and the National Power Corporation and PGI signed a service contract for the development of the Tiwi and Macban assets. So a year after, Naglabong 1 was drilled, making it the first discovery well for Tiwi. And 3 years after, in Macban, Bulalo 1 was also drilled, making it the discovery well for Macban. So Bulali 1 is still operating in Macban today. And just 5 years down the road, the first 110 megawatt power plants were brought online in both Tiwi and Macban. So if you would look at the development, it's actually a fast-paced development for the geothermal industry for the Philippines. The reason for this is if you would look at history, the late 1960s era into the 1970s are actually periods wherein we experienced the oil crisis. So the Philippine government tried to look for other alternatives, and upon being introduced to the idea of geothermal energy, we utilized that resource and developed the geothermal industry in the Philippines. And if you would look at the established geothermal power markets, we are right now second. So we are producing around 1,937 megawatts. So that's based on the Philippines DOE data for 2020. And then if you would look at how the consumption of the Philippines is actually division, you can actually see that at most we are still occupied by coal, which is representing around 56%, and around 21% is being utilized for natural gas. But if you would look at the components of the renewable sources, including geothermal, hydro, and solar, we're composing approximately around 20%. So 20% is being what do you call this, supplied by renewable sources, and 10.1% of that is being supplied by geothermal energy. And in the country as well, if you would look at the producing geothermal fields, what is the composition of the 1,937 megawatts? You can see that including in the top three producers are Macban and Tiwi. And uh, Macban and Tiwi is actually supplying around 64.14% of the overall energy requirement for the Luzon grid, Luzon Island. So that's for the geothermal areas in the Philippines. So how do you explore geothermal resources? It's actually covered with several phases. So we have the three Gs. Three Gs is representative of the geology, geochemistry, and geophysics, and after which you'll do the exploratory drilling. So before you do the exploratory drilling, you have the three Gs. You study first the geology, the volcanic history of the area, and then you do the geochemistry, which is basically understanding the quality of the fluid and the temperature that we are expecting based from the manifested chemistry in the area. And then the geophysics basically sizing up how large would be the geothermal resource. So that's the three Gs. And if proven viable, the commerciality of the particular area would be verified through an exploratory drilling. So the key facilities in the geothermal process flow is actually composed of the well, you have the separators, and then the pipelines which supplies your separated steam and brine into respective end endpoint of the overall process, and then the scrubber which basically further refines the produced steam into the agreed 99.99% quality of the power plant. So in the power plant, we have the turbine or the generator, which basically uses that steam into producing energy. And then we have the cooling towers, which basically condenses some of those unutilized steam. And then the switchyard, which is being used for transmission of the produced electricity into its consumers. So how is geothermal energy converted into electricity? So this is a short diagram. So we have the well bore. The well bore, as you can see here, we drill the wells into a productive geothermal resource, and then that that steam is being brought upwards, so up to the wellhead, and then that's being put into the separator, which is number three here. The separators basically separate the steam and the brine into different pipelines. So the red ones are the steam, and the blue ones are the brine. So the steam goes into the scrubber for further refinement, wherein you'll produce 99.99% steam quality. And then after that, you deliver that steam into the power plant, wherein it's being utilized into production of electricity, while the produced brine is then injected back into the reservoir. So this injected brine is then again um, utilized for further reheating, making the loop system possible. So what we get from the reservoir, we injected it back again for further reheating and further utilization in the overall process. So just a short description of the PV field. So it's located in the municipality of Albay, and it's around 65 active wells and installed capacity of 234 megawatts. And from the last update of this slide deck, it has produced around 52.1 gigawatt hours. And the Macban field is located in Bai and Calauan in the province of Laguna, and the municipality of Santo Tomas province in Batangas. And it is composed of 81 active wells and an installed capacity of 458 megawatts, and 72.2 gigawatt hours have been produced from January 1979 of its geothermal operation to June 2016, when this slide deck was updated. So the PGPC geothermal fields, as I've discussed, are composed of Tiwi and Macban, and both of these have started commercial operation as early as 1979. And in terms of geothermal wells, Macban has a larger number of wells, while TV is around a lower number of around 65. And Macban is producing 458 megawatts, and half of that is 234 is around megawatts is being supplied by the geothermal plant in TV. So we have now come to the crucial question: why geothermal, and what is the role of geothermal in our protecting the environment? So geothermal energy offers many advantages for electricity generation. It has significantly lower fewer emissions than fuel fired plants. So it's around 5% of coal only. And given the closed loop system that I discussed earlier, what we basically produce are being returned back into the reservoir for reuse. So hence it's being renewable. And the land use is also relatively a fraction of other smaller of other uh, types of energy source or energy um, or other source of energy. So 10%, for example, that of solar, and it can really coexist with natural habitat and agriculture. I remember seeing a photo of a tiger in Indonesia sleeping on top our of our pipelines before in Indonesia. So during the time of Chevron. So it just actually exemplify how we can coexist with nature. And if we would look at most of our facilities, these facilities are installed in um, mountainous area, and they readily coexist with the fauna and the flora in the area. And it has also a reliable base load of renewable energy, which means that it's available and operates for 24/7. And this is just a clear example of the benefit of geothermal energy. So this is an example from Iceland. So this is Reykjavik in 1930s. So electricity during that time is being supplied by coal-fired power plants. And this is Reykjavik on the right day, which is 99.8% of the houses are now connected to the geothermal heating system. And uh, as you can see, it's very clean right now in terms of the air pollution. They've been able to reduce that as well. So that's basically how the advantage of geothermal energy can be shown in this a very stark example of the role of geothermal energy in the environment. And then in terms of the economy, geothermal energy offers advantages over other sources of electricity generation for it being reliable, indigenous, and being affordable. Reliable meaning it is one of the fuel source that is designed to operate 24/7. So geothermal fields have been operating for as long as 100 years. So example of that is the one is shown earlier from Italy. And it supports energy reliance as well of the countries and our efforts to get away from imported fossil fuels. So this is one of those examples wherein we can utilize our own source of energy. And then it is also affordable, meaning electricity users pay less on electric consumption because of the availability of this geothermal resource. And then it is also resistant to fuel price changes. And geothermal has always been one of the cheapest fuel sources in the Philippines. And again, as mentioned earlier, it being available for almost 24/7 operation. And finally, I think this is my second to the last slide. Um, Geothermal power in terms of operability, so it offers diversity in terms of being able to supply the demand from its customers. So it offers high reliability and availability, and we are can actually follow the demand of the system. So whatever is being demanded from the the users, we can easily provide. And then it's not directly affected again by the change in the price of oil or any fossil fuel for that matter. So this just a few picture. The first one on top is Pakban and the lower part is Tiwi. So just emphasizing that geothermal energy is clean, green, and reliable. So I think this is my last slide. If you have further questions, I think this is the time that I can answer those questions.
Thank you, Jake, for that very interesting presentation. And I'm sure our audience will have a lot of questions, so we'll be taking your questions in a while. But I think the best part that you highlighted, that one, how important geothermal energy is for Philippines, not only in terms of less dependence on imports, but also economically it's very viable because, as you clearly mentioned, it's very affordable and it's very reliable, and it is also very cheapest source of fuel in Philippines. So that is something very, very interesting. And thank you so much for highlighting your views on these, because it not only talks about your views, not only highlight about economic ideas, about national economy, but also in relations and the trade relations or less dependence on the external actors. So I think this is very, very critical part of your presentation, which I'm sure all of us appreciate. Thank you, Jake. We'll be coming back to you in a while for the question and answers. Next, we have Nihar. Dr. Nihar Nayak, he's a good friend of mine, and the interesting part of our association is that it's almost 2 decades long, and we were batchmates. I think we studied together, and then our academic interests are so similar in terms of environment in South Asia and other things that we have been working together in different ways, academically, collaboration, and otherwise. And pleasure to have you, Nihar. And I think Nihar is one person I can take little liberty with, just to share with everyone that initially we planned two webinars, one on Sunday and one on Monday. And the Monday webinar got cancelled because we got the news that the typhoon will be striking on Monday. And by that time, I had already invited Nihar for the Monday webinar. So I felt a little odd what to tell Nihar, whether that it has been cancelled or something. So I thought it's best that we combine the speakers for both the days together on Sunday. And it's wonderful that Nihar readily agreed. So pleasure to have you, Nihar. Also because not only because you're an expert and also because you're a personal friend of mine. So absolutely a pleasure to have you here. And to tell our audience more about Nihar, well, Dr. Nihar Nayak, he's a research fellow with MP-IDSA New Delhi, and his areas of expertise are political transition in the Eastern Himalayan region, non-traditional security, soft power, diplomacy, and cooperative security in South Asia. Well, he has a PhD in international politics from GNU New Delhi, and he was a visiting fellow in Peace Research Institute Oslo and also BHU, and also a guest faculty in Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie, from 2006 to 2011. And he has both national and international publications to his credit, including a book on strategic Himalayas, Republic and Nepal and external powers. And presently, he's working on impact of climate change in the Himalayan region, security implications for India. And today, Dr. Nihar, he'll be sharing his views with us in terms of how we have climate change in the Himalayan region and how it is affecting different countries and the area. So thank you, Nihar, for joining us once again. Pleasure to have you here. Over to you. Please share your views.
Thank you, Dr. Bharti, for your kind invitation and giving me an opportunity to speak on this topic. My greetings to everyone. Greetings from Delhi, because I can't say good evening or good morning, so better to greetings. That is the better way to acknowledge acknowledge your presence here. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be speaking on basically climate change impacts in the Hinduku Himalayan region, which initially I gave my topic to Dr. Bharti about the Himalayan region, but slightly expanded the region, particularly the geographical region of my topic, so that I can cover extra other most countries in this region. Though, why did I select this topic? Obviously, it's part of my research topic and very close to my research area. One is that the first and foremost reason for selecting this topic is that the Himalayan Hindukush region has the maximum snow storage after the Arctic zones or poles. And second importance of this topic is that this is the most vulnerable region on this earth in terms of climate change impacts. And in this region, if you see, there is a recent basically research which is found that the region is expected to lose half of its present day glacier area by 2060, a decade earlier than the previous expected deadline, that was 2070. So that means how quickly the climate change is going to affect or impact that livelihood, geopolitics of that Himalayan region, Hindukush Himalayan region. So that is why I felt basically to bring this topic before you to know about what is happening in the Himalayan region and how serious the issue is. There are 8 countries which are located in this Himalayan Hindukush region, starting from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. It is very interesting and it is very important to know the geopolitics before coming to that climate change, because it's very much interlinked and I can say correlated. And today I must thank Dr. Bharti for holding this talk. The US presidential election almost yesterday, it is ended with renewable energy and climate change. And both the presidential candidates have huge differences in terms of the US foreign policy towards renewable energy and oil and climate change. And President Trump defended his position by saying that US did good job by withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. On the other hand, the Democratic nominee, Mr. Joe, he just rejected that viewpoint. And I would just like to little bit add here that the previous election, when President Trump won, because the Hillary Clinton and then the presidential nominee from the Democratic Party, she made a similar kind of statement. Perhaps she lost that election, I can say, from my research findings. I found that because of this kind of statement that the Democratic Party is going to focus on the climate change and committed to the Paris Agreement. And many oil companies, but energy companies in US perhaps didn't like Democratic Party's policy on that, and they supported Trump that time. Again, this is going to be a crucial issue again. Just before this end of this campaigning, and the similar kind of a statement or position has taken the Democratic Party, and perhaps it is going to again the game changer in this US elections this year. So why I'm saying that, because the future politics or the global politics is going to be confined to or revolve around mostly in the climate change and energy issues. There are other geopolitical issues like Indo-Pacific strategy or other issues obviously there, then sea lines, communications, all this. But this climate change is going to be an important topic in future. Coming to that topic, this Hinduku Himalayan region is basically the home of around 240 million people. With 1.9 billion people living in that surrounding hills and rivers basins. Around roughly, I can say that 10 major Asian rivers are basically originating from this Tibet, or you can say that Hinduku Himalayan region. So one can imagine the importance of this region. So what are the challenges of the region? So because the 1/3 of this world population living here, 10 Asian rivers are rivers are flowing from this region, highly vulnerable region, and it is going to affect the livelihood of the entire region like anything. And most importantly, if you see the political system of these 8 political countries, there are a lot of differences. They are running with different political values and systems. In terms of the size, are very obviously huge, like starting from Bhutan, one of the smallest country, to all the way to China is the largest country in this region. Then in terms of territory-wise, in terms of economic-wise, in terms of population-wise, there are a lot of differences. Even taking their position on the global issues also, there are a lot of differences. There in the bilateral level, there are a lot of differences. I'll bring to that in the next round of my presentation. Then coming to that, my presentation, what are the major challenges in this region? You know, this geopolitics is like this. The first challenge is that 1/3 of all these countries, basically, they live in, and the population of this region, they live in poverty. Around half of that population are malnourished, and particularly women and children are even more likely to be adversely affected by food insecurity if this climate change impact continues without any appropriate action. Second challenge, the region is also facing the basically heightened environmental concerns, as I discussed, focused on that. And the third challenge is that a recent study predicted a significant reduction in basically suitable habitat and biological corridors of the species, particularly the Himalayan species, the high altitude species in the climate change scenario. So a lot of fauna, forest, and these high altitude animals, so like snow leopard and others, they will be extinguished in maybe by the next 5 decades time. So it is very extremely important issue to basically protect these species. And the most important research or findings on this Himalayan region or Hinduku Himalayan region recently found that by International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, who have been this organization have been extensive study on the Himalayan region, particularly climate change and glacier melting and snow melting, all those issues. The ICMO research found that more glacial lakes in the Himalayan region is going to be either it will be come down or there will be more cloud bursts. So this kind of projection they have given. And they found that there are 47 critical and dangerous basically glaciers are there who will be creating basically flooding in the downstream areas, particularly in Nepal, China, and India. And of those 47 lakes, which will be like seriously vulnerable because of climate change, 25 are in the Tibetan region, and there are around 21 in Nepal, and there are one in India. So you see, there are a lot of problems. Tension is, as you know, tension is going on between India and China in the Himalayan region, particularly Ladakh region and Sikkim region. So and another this kind of problem is there. So when the countries needs to be come together and to basically address this climate change issue, somehow this geopolitical tension is affecting this cooperation. And the last challenge, which is quietly, I'll just further add certain points here. The geopolitical tension, particularly, as I said, that is very important. And the region that is highly divided, as I said, that's because of different size, the geopolitical factor, they're highly divided. And there are also, if you find the distrust, or you can say the a lot of distrust, and because asymmetrical relations, because that's generated this kind of structure in this region. And particularly in geopolitical region, I'm saying about basically the border disputes between countries. How these 8 countries, if you see, they all have border disputes, and the borders are not properly demarcated, and still they have been negotiating, and the tension is generating a lot of tension in this region. For example, first, China, India, as you know, it has been extensively covered in international media that for the last 6 months, the troops on the both sides are standing against to each other in the Ladakh region and other parts of the Himalayan region. So because of the border between China and India is not demarcated, particularly in the Himalayan region, which is highly vulnerable. There is also border tension between India and Pakistan. There is a border tension between Pakistan and Afghanistan. There is a border tension between China and Bhutan. And there is a border tension between India and Nepal also. So if you see all the 8 countries except Bangladesh, which has been recently 4 or 5 years back resolved its border dispute with India, but other countries are almost trapped in this kind of border disputes, and this is seriously affecting both regional, bilateral cooperation on this climate change impact. And the second, in this geopolitical tension, I would like to flag here that most militarized zone also, this region, particularly because in the Pakistan side, China side, India has problem with both the countries, and there are a large number of militaries that are deployed in the Himalayan region from China side, India side, and Pakistan side. So this is affecting its impact on the climate and in the Himalayan region. And there is a high altitude strategic infrastructure is going on in the China side. Massive infrastructure construction is going on in terms of railway lines, in terms of hydro projects, in terms of the business centers, in terms of military infrastructures. So it is also having all those infrastructure, all the construction sites have their impacts in the Himalayan region. And for example, that CPEC, which has the CPEC project between Pakistan and China, is also contributing huge environmental damage in that highly vulnerable region of Himalaya, in that particular Hinduku part of the Himalayan region. And the third, I think, regional tension, I can say that the poor implementation of national action plan on climate change. Although particularly in the SAARC region, particularly, and except India, in almost all these 8 countries where they have very poor record of basically implementing this national action plan on climate change, because all those countries are party to that Paris Agreement, and their commitment to that nationally and determined contributions is not in very not progressing very substantially, or you can say impressively. So there are a lot of challenges there. And there is also poor bilateral and multilateral regional forums. Except, I think, recently there is a Hinduku's Himalayan ministerial meetings happened recently, just after 2 years of hard labor and a lot of difficulties and negotiations. This ICMOD, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, finally brought these 8 countries together to basically have a dialogue on climate change impacts in the Hinduku's Himalayan region. Otherwise, if you'll see, there is no formal multilateral mechanism to address these common common challenge. And there are other forums like SARC. As you know, it is not happening on regular basis, but still there are certain resolutions passed under SARC arrangement, but still because of no differences at the bilateral level, at the maybe the multilateral level, somehow all those resolutions are not implemented very effectively. And the last one, I can say that the most challenging part for these smaller countries, particularly like Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, these are the developing countries, and Pakistan, Afghanistan, they don't have sufficient resources or funds to basically implement their national action plan on climate change. They don't have sufficient technology also how to implement this adaptation and then mitigation programs as they have committed to that to their Paris Agreement. So these are challenges are existing. At the same time, rapidly this climate change impact is happening rapidly in that Himalayan region, but the cooperation is also not happening in a similar way. So as I said, that in this ministerial level meeting which happened on 15th of October on Hinduku Himalayan region, almost all the ministers of these participating countries or member countries, they have agreed that they will support how to basically address this climate change impacts in the Himalayan region. They have given assurance of support basically for the call to action. The group announced that they would hold basically regular meetings on Mountain Ministerial Summit that will be going particularly happening maybe perhaps in maybe twice or once in a year. In that ministerial declaration, they also agreed to be a unified voice in a global negotiation and constitute task force that would monitor each nation's progress. This is a very positive development, perhaps what SARC didn't do, or other like BIMSTEC didn't do, or other regional forums didn't do, or NAM didn't do. I think perhaps the climate change as a common challenge, as a common threat to all these countries, maybe perhaps bring them together and restore some amount of peace and stability and economic development in this region. My last part of my presentation, I'll say that what are the actions required? These are obviously, as I said, that a lot of differences are there still existing. It requires a lot of dialogue and negotiation, how to find a basically how to find a solution to this problem. This is only single country, not a single country can't address this issue, because, for example, Nepal or Bhutan, although they are sitting in the middle of the Himalayan region, because of their size in terms of their resources, in terms of technology, these two countries can't challenge or basically address this climate change alone. So they need cooperation and support from the regional countries like neighboring countries to come together and fight this common challenge. The objective of this basically action, basically to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius as committed, as declared in the Paris Agreement of 2016. The first and foremost action is basically strict implementation of a National Action Plan on Climate Change, or NDC. That is very important. And sharing of knowledge and building trust across the region, that is again very important, particularly because of a lot of bilateral tensions between these countries. So they should share their knowledge and problems and difficulties on the climate changes at the different forums like Hinduku's Himalayan region ministerial meeting kind of forum. They should do that. Then listening to voices of Hinduku's particular Himalayan region people. What are the indigenous technologies required for this kind of addressing this kind of challenges? And the last and the most important is basically to improving the livelihood across the region, basically sharing their thoughts and knowledge, focusing on the basically traditional or basically lifestyle of how they are managing, in particular local people, how they are doing with their climate change since quite long time back. So these are the issues needs to be focused, and at the same time, the developed countries, those who are contributing emissions, particularly US and Russia and other developed countries, I think they should basically liberally contribute with funds and technology to these smaller countries so they can effectively manage this challenge in future. Thank you for your attention. I'll look forward to question and answer on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I think Paul has also joined back. Great. Well, thank you, Nihar. Absolutely insightful presentation. And I think you have done so much justice to your topic. And you explained how in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, in spite of the climate change problem, as of now, there is no integrated mountain mechanism, a formal mechanism in terms of dealing with the issue. And also how it is very critical that the regional states, they cooperate amongst themselves and with each other, which is very, very critical in order to resolve the climate change that everyone, every single country is doing. And it's very difficult for one single country to actually resolve it by itself. So absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Nihar, for that presentation.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be waiting for the Q&A sessions, and we'll come back to you. Thank you. Kamakshi, would you like to say something? Would you like to?
Hello everyone, I Kamakshi Luthra from Center for Indian and Global Studies would like to thank you for joining us for today's session. And now I would like to introduce you to our convener and moderator, Dr. Professor Bharti Chhibber. Dr. Professor Chhibber has been teaching political science at the University of Delhi for more than 16 years. A meritorious scholar, she has been honored with many awards and fellowships and has published books, research papers, and articles in mainstream journals to her credit. Dr. Chhibber's specialization includes environmental issues, international relations, and foreign policies. Dr. Chhibber has worked extensively with non-governmental organizations to create awareness and empower people on environmental, educational, and gender issues. Now, I request Dr. Chhibber to moderate the session.
Well, thank you, Kamakshi. Thank you so much. And I think she has set the tone for the next presentation. And I'll be, since it's already 6 here in India times, it's 5 rather. So I'll be very brief today in my presentation and sharing my views. I'll be talking about how renewable energy is actually powering the future, how it's going to further empower all of us. Uh, when we talk about the whole process of globalization and the process of industrialization, urbanization, burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, all these problems, as we all know, have resulted in further problems, because the whole process of industrialization and urbanization is not sustainable. So, unfortunately, it has resulted in the problems like desertification, global warming, climate change, pollution, and long-term loss of vegetation, water supply, famine, displacement. So all these problems that we face, well, is a man-made rather to a large extent, and is the result of climate change or global warming. Uh, and the biggest contributor is the whole process of urbanization and industrialization. We also have the fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, IPCC, as we all know it, which says that over the last 130 years, temperature of the world has increased by approximately 0.85 centigrade, which is a huge figure in terms. Why? Because not only when we have an increase in temperature, it results in global warming in terms of very difficult times for the human beings, but it also affects all the living species. For example, if the water level rises in the sea, or if the water temperature rises in the sea, then many of those marine species, they become extinct. So it is affecting everyone alike. And also another important area is of the sustainable development goals. Well, our sustainable development goals in 2015 talks about transforming our world by 2030, and it has 17 sustainable development goals and 169 targets. And how important sustainable development is, how important climate change is, how important global warming is, we'll come to know, because almost 10 goals out of these actually talk about sustainable development in one way or the other. And also, when we talk about all these things, then one thing that comes to our mind is renewable source of energy. And solar energy is something which I'll be talking about today very briefly. Solar energy, we can say it is the future. It's going to power us. Why we say that? Well, one, if we take a look at India or the Indian history, then environment protection is one of the very critical part of our own constitution. And in addition to that, we in India are very lucky because we have long and sunny days. There are many countries which do not see sunshine for many, many days or even months together with a lot of rain. But luckily, India has a very moderate kind of a climate where we enjoy sunshine almost throughout the year. So India is an appropriate place for harnessing solar energy for multi-purpose initiatives, including agriculture, industries, and of course, domestic use. And in India, we have the stakeholders, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and the Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency. In addition, we also have Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. Well, we have taken many initiatives in order to achieve our targets. Well, we pledged that we would derive at least 40% of our energy needs from renewable sources by 2030. And this includes plans for the development of 100 gigawatt of solar energy by 2022 as part of our national solar mission. In 2015, a 100 megawatt solar power plant was inaugurated in near Jodhpur, which caters to the needs of electricity of 30 villages. And from then onwards, we have many, many initiatives that India has taken in terms of solar energy. And very recently, our Prime Minister also inaugurated Reva Solar Power Project, which is considered as Asia's largest solar power project. And it has the capacity of 750 megawatt of solar power plant project, and it was set up in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And the best part of this project is that it will not only cater to the neighboring areas in Madhya Pradesh, but it will also help in supplying of the energy needs of Delhi Metro. So that highlights how different states are actually working together in terms of solar energy projects in India. Well, in addition to that, I have a lot of figures about the solar power capacity of different states and also of the different countries, which probably I'll share some other times. When we talk about solar energy, then not only it is beneficial in being a renewable source of energy, it creates no pollution at all, and India being a country, and all these are definitely very positive steps. But at the same time, we have something very interesting, which is not only in terms of economy, a contribution in our economy, but also in terms of employment generation. We have solar startups. And well, India's strategic geographical location and in sunshine is a boon to all solar energy companies in India. And thus, solar startups in India and funding to these solar generating ideas throughout the country is growing tremendously in last couple of years. And also, well, India is not only working towards its own fulfilling its own renewable energy needs or energy needs in terms of using the renewable energy, but we have taken global initiatives also. So that means we are collaborating and cooperating with different international countries also. Well, at the global level, with a view to bring together solar-rich, resource-rich countries. Well, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with French President Hollande, they launched an international solar alliance that was in the climate conference in Paris in 2015. And this solar alliance has its headquarters in India itself. And it's a collaboration of solar resource-rich countries to address these issues and also provide a forum to cooperate for mutual growth and sustainable development. And ISA activities include joint research, joint ventures, development and demonstration, sharing information and knowledge, capacity building, cooperation in training, building institutions, and common standards, exchange of technology experts. So basically, they are cooperating with each other in terms of both technology and in order to ensure that the benefits of solar energy reaches across the globe. And we also have collaborations in this context with the World Bank Group. However, there's certain challenges which are there, and not only in India but across the world, in order to harness the solar energy or the benefits of solar energy. And what first channel is the perception of the high cost of solar energy or the solar panels. The initially, obviously, we all know that it was very costly and there was a lot of subsidies which was required. But if you look at the latest figures, then we'll realize that solar energy or the solar panels, in terms of installation, has become much cheaper. So this perception that it is still very costly needs to change. The second challenge that we have is that we need a very focused and collaborative approach, which is driven by R&D research, in order to ensure that we attain technology leadership. India is already doing very fine, but in order to further enhance our capabilities. And finally, we need to build consumer awareness. We have seen a lot of governmental institutions, ministries, even school and colleges installing solar panels and going a big way towards solar energy. But we also need many more domestic consumers to come forward and install and use solar energy. So while concluding, I would say that due to India's projected economic growth and increase in population, the demand for energy in India is expected to double by 2040. So, in order to engage with international partners and get the best available technology, it's very important that all of us, different countries, not only collaborate, but we also have very competitive rates. And finally, collaborative research and development projects will definitely not only bring about sharing of information and knowledge in this area, but it will also reduce the cost further. Already we have seen that it is a big source of jobs in the solar industry, which will further contribute to sustainable development. So that means in order to ensure that the world comes together in order to face the problem of climate change and the global warming, and to ensure that we move towards sustainable development, renewable energy will actually power the future. And renewable energy, one of the very important sources of renewable energy is the solar energy. And we need a holistic approach in order to ensure that there's participation from all the stakeholders and there's benefit not only to one country but across the world. India is already taking the lead in terms of moving ahead with the solar energy, and we hope that solar energy will power the future and mitigate the crisis of climate change. Well, thank you. I think now we'll take any question that we have on my presentation also in a very short while. We have our final speaker for today, Paul Edward. So Paul is able to join us. So he shared his video earlier in case he's not able to join us, but since he's there, so Paul, would you like to share your views? And I think, yeah, of course, I think also take a very quick minute in order to introduce Paul, although, Paul is a chemical engineer and he has spent 5 years of his chemical engineering practice in the environment field, such as water treatment, technical assistance to solid waste management of local government unit in his home province of Albi, compliance monitoring of industries and firms on environmental laws, as mandated by the Environment Management Bureau. And he's Environment Management Specialist 1, and he's also contributed in terms of raising awareness on environment protection and conservation. And he's also taking up his master's degree on Master of Science in Biodiversity and Environmental Management and many other courses. And he's also the chapter secretary of the Philippine Institute of Chemical Engineers, PIChE-Bicol, and part of the core committee of the Young Engineers section. So, of course, since we have co-organized a couple of things together. So once again, welcome, Paul, to the event. And it's a pleasure to have you here in spite of, as I said, the whole crisis of the typhoon. So please share your views with us.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Bharti. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. Actually, I would like to apologize in case I will be choppy in the middle of the video because currently I'm just using mobile data since power is out here in our region because of the typhoon. And so let me share my screen because I prepared a short presentation. Is it now visible?
Yeah, please go ahead, Paul. It is visible. Yeah.
Okay. So so the global primary energy consumption, this is the graph of the global primary energy consumption from 1800s to 2015. So this data is from Our World in Data. So actually, as you can see here in the graph, around 1900s to 1950s, you can see that there's already an increase in the energy consumption, primarily with the use of coal. Then, of course, around 1950s, as you can see, there is a spike increase in the increase of energy consumption. That's around, I think, 400% increase compared to the 1950s to 2000s. That is because in this age, we have the third industrial revolution that we call the digital age, wherein the development of gadgets and technologies, and we all know that they are powered by electricity. So that is the reason because of this spike in energy consumption. And also in this graph, also from Our World in Data, it shows how the energy consumption by the Asia Pacific is increasing rapidly. So as you can see, other countries almost they increase not so steep. However, as you can see, the Asia Pacific it increased rapidly. Maybe because this is the reason that of the number of the developed and developing countries in Asia Pacific as well. So also according to so also according to IEA, in the current scenario, energy demand rises by 1.3% each year to 2040 with increasing demand for energy services. Then let's talk about the global carbon emission from energy. So this is the total the world has generated. Of course, I think you have an idea on what sector contributes the biggest in this number. And of course, that is the energy. So the energy contributed at around 36.01 gigatons. That's around 73% of the total global emissions. So that is a big number. So you probably be asking me, why am I sharing this data? Because I want you to have an idea of what is happening right now. And as you can see, we have a continuous increase in our carbon emissions from the energy sector. So that's why I want actually in the Philippines, and this is the data. We an average household is consuming around 248.1 kilowatt per hour of electricity. Of course, to for you guys, energy conservation and the shift to renewable and greener energy. So currently, this is the data in the Philippines. According to this graph, around 20 to 30% of the electricity production in the Philippines is coming from the renewable sources. And as you can see in the scale, as the color of the country grows greener, that is also a bigger share from the renewable. So the target, of course, is we make this figure greener because we want to push through the use of renewable energy. And of course, maybe you'll be asking, as a member of the general audience of the general public, how can I contribute to energy conservation? Of course, we can do such small things like turning off lights when not in use, use of energy saving technologies in your home or in your office, and of course, attending webinars like this so you will be knowledgeable about energy conservation and the renewable energy. And also, you can take it to greater heights like raising awareness, mobilizing the community, or even encouraging the global leaders for the implementation of laws that will empower the development of renewable energies in our country. So I would like to invite everyone to help us raise awareness and make a call about this because as you can see currently we are experiencing a typhoon here in the Bicol region in the Philippines, and as the time goes by these typhoons get stronger and they coming more frequent here in the Philippines. So countries such as the Philippines, which are highly vulnerable from the climate change, we are really taking the toll in this climate crisis. So I will also take this opportunity to share this initiative for energy conservation. So this is the Albi Efficiency Conservation Initiative. So this encourages the provincial offices in the province of Albi to adopt the use of energy saving technologies. So I would like to encourage everyone to help us by signing the petition, support the initiative by clicking this link or scan the QR code, so that will be faster. So you could also share the link through your social media. So to give you an idea, this Albay Energy Efficiency and Conservation Initiative is initiated by the Solon Project in partnership of our organization, the Philippine Institute of Chemical Engineers, because our organization is very into environmental and climate action. So we really support and partnered in drafting this ordinance that will help to conserve energy to somehow reduce our emission from the energy sector. So I am asking for your support, Tain. So thank you in advance for those who will sign the petition. So that's it. In behalf of our partners from the Philippines, the Environmental Management Bureau, Region 5, the Philippine Institute of Chemical Engineers, Albay 4-H Club, and CLUP, we would like to extend our gratitude to the Center for Indian and Global Studies for having us. So if you have questions, if you want to talk with me about climate action, environmental conservation, and anything else, you can send an email. So this is my email, this is my LinkedIn account, and you can also follow me in Instagram. I post a lot of pictures there. So I hope I say this right. Bahat Danyavad. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much. So that's it. Thank you, Dr. Bharti.
Thank you, Paul, for that very quick and but very important information that you shared with us. And of course, we all have to work towards climate action and mitigate the climate crisis. Thank you, Paul. So I think with that we have we have had all our presentations. So I think the floor is open for Q&A. Will we request all our participants on the YouTube live channel, if they have any questions, please post them in the chat box. We'll take it immediately here. And I already have some questions with me, and probably I could quickly ask them one by one. I think the first question is to Jake. Jake probably would like to take this question. This is from Philippines itself. It says, can we apply the geothermal technology that you have spoken about? Can we apply these trends in mining metallic and non-metallic mines?
Can we repeat the question, Dr.
Yeah. Can we apply these trends that you have shared in mining metallic and non-metallic mines?
I'm not very familiar with the relationship between the thermal energy and then the mining industry, but I believe there's a particular study wherein mining is somehow correlated with the existence of geothermal energy renewable sources. So I think that's a possibility, but I'm not an expert on the area, but my personal hunch should be probably yes.
Right. Well, thank you for answering that question, Jake. Well, there is a question for me also. Rather, there are two questions that I have. One is from Manik Prasad and one is from Akash. Is it possible to form solar energy supply group on world level? There is always sunlight in other corner of the world if it is dark here. Well, I think sun never stops shining on India, so it's never dark here, Manik. So to correct you, thank you for the question, but it never stops shining here, So, but there'll be there are some data which I'll share with you, Manik. We get sunlight. The Earth gets sunlight. What we get in 24 hours, that is in one single day, is enough to actually meet the energy requirements of the whole world for 1 year. So you can understand how much solar energy or how much sunlight we are getting every day. And as I shared in my presentation, that we already have International Solar Alliance, which was formed in 2015. And the main idea was that the countries who are resource rich, who are rich in terms of resource, solar energy, they can actually cooperate with each other in terms of meeting the needs of each other, technology transfer. So I think we already are moving towards in that direction. And in the near future, I'm sure there'll be further collaboration. And right now, all the countries are taking some or the other efforts, as Jake has also shared, in terms of renewable energy. And also, as India is taking lead in solar energy, I'm looking forward to further collaboration in terms of solar energy, in terms of both R&D and also in terms of trade, in order to ensure that the resource-rich countries, they can actually help the countries who may not have abundance of solar energy. And then there's another second question of Akash. He has asked that if some countries are not actually collaborating or following or taking part in the initiative of climate action, then what can be the future? Well, Akash, I'm sure every country is doing something in terms of mitigating the severe consequence of climate change in one way or the other. Means may be different. For example, Jake shared about geothermal. We are talking about solar energy, but all the countries are taking steps nationally. Requirement is also to take steps internationally as well as individually. So I think all of us should contribute in different ways, even if it's a small step for mitigating the climate crisis in terms of using renewable energy. And also saying that somebody is or some country is not doing, that means you can absolve yourself of your responsibility. That is not right. We need to do our duty. We need to do, because it's not only about the present generation, it's also about the future generation. So I think all of us should work together, and let us start at all the three levels: individual, national, international. I'm sure things will be better in the near future. And then we have further questions. There's a question for you, Nihar. It says that you spoke about Hindukush Himalayan region, the climate crisis in the Hindukush Himalayan region. So the participant, she wants to ask, what are the serious reasons for this crisis, and why they have not been overcome, in addition to the reason that you have shared, that is non-cooperation. So basically she's asking two things: one, what are the serious reasons for this crisis of climate change there, and secondly she wants to know that you have shared that the countries are not cooperating with each other, or there's no formal mechanism. That's one reason, but what could be the other reasons for escalation of these crises?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question, Bharti. That participant. No, one is that a serious reason. You see, look, one is that obviously there is a bilateral tension is going on existing between all these affected countries, or all those 80 countries as one. Second, these countries, they don't have sufficient, as I said, the resources and technology to mitigate and how to address their mitigation and adaptation programs. So that is number two. And third is, you see, globally also, see, countries are divided. Like US withdrew from the Paris Agreement. China, India has differences over a lot of issues on this Paris Agreement and climate change issues. Earlier, Canada and other countries also withdrew. So there is no consensus. I mean, the world is divided on the climate change issue. Russia is yet to accept that climate change is existing. So it's there, because a lot of differences are there, and there is no common mechanism to address this issue. I think because of that bilateral issue. I think. Because of a lot of bilateral tension existing between these countries, and that is the reason that is not progressing substantially. Perhaps in the coming days, since East Timor has taken this initiative, perhaps it will move forward, because this is going to be a common challenge to all these countries in the near future. Bharti, over.
Yeah. Thank you, Nihar. Participants is almost 6:30, and we are way beyond our schedule. We want to wind up by 6:15. So, we have a couple of other questions, but we'll definitely forward your questions to our guest, and we'll get back to you through email. And it's absolutely a pleasure once again to have all the participants and all the speakers. And Paul, would you like to share something, or should I share that?
Okay, I'll share it.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen.
Mhm.
Okay, so to all the participants, we as stated, we will be providing a certificate of attendance to all our participants who watch this on YouTube live. So you can take time. We'll give you time to screenshot this QR code for the attendance sheet. So don't forget to fill out the attendance sheet through this link at tinyurl.com/renewable webinar first. That's tinyurl.com renewable webinar first. So please don't forget to sign to get to claim your certificate. So we will have the link open for 24 hours only. So fill out as soon as possible and kindly give us 1 to 2 weeks to prepare for your certificates. We will be sending them to you through your email. So again, please take a screenshot of this so you will not forget the link and you will get the QR code. So again, thank you very much for attending this webinar with us. And apologies for the some technical glitches that happened. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So all the participants who have joined us on YouTube will be getting it. And Nihar, you don't. And Nihar, this is only for the participants. This certificate for the speakers, that is my responsibility. It will reach you. Don't worry. So, this scan was only for the participants. For the speakers, it will reach you right in your inbox.
Thank you, Bharti. Thank you very much.
Yeah, because there are two different certificates. We have separate certificates for participants, and we have separate certificate of appreciation for our speakers.
Okay.
So there'll be a different certificate. It will reach you right in your inbox. Okay. So I mean, it's absolutely a pleasure, and I'm so glad. Initially, when we heard about the typhoon, we thought that we'll be winding up our session in 1 hour. But we had such an interesting presentations today, and also such wonderful questions from our audience that we went beyond our stipulated time. So I think that shows the importance that the environmental issues are actually, and the awareness that the people are actually getting in terms of environmental issues, and the importance that they're giving to environmental issues and the climate change. And also, I think it speaks volumes about our speakers also. They are also so good. So I think with that, I think I'll once again say thank you to all my wonderful panelists, Paul, Giecel, Jake, for sharing your views. And of course, Nihar, Dr. Nihar, one of my best friends here in India in terms of academic collaborations. And thank you so much, and special thanks once again to our Philippines partner who have joined in spite of a typhoon hitting them. So it's amazing, absolutely. We'll continue our discussion in the upcoming events, and look forward to having all our audience once again back with us. And in addition to our speakers, I will also thank my students, as I call them. CKN, that is Chandragupt, Kamakshi, and Nikhil, the team of my three wonderful students who always work with me in terms of ensuring that all our events, they go without any hitch, and there's a lot of planning involved, and especially in this event as we have to reschedule a couple of things. So we were working the whole night on Friday and Saturday. The whole night we were working on changing things and readjusting, but it went off so well. So once again, thank you to my wonderful speakers, my audience. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to have you. We shall meet again very soon. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.